The arrival. The train screeched to a halt, sending a puff of black smoke into the pale morning sky. Elena Marquez stepped down from the wooden carriage, her gloved fingers gripping a small leather suitcase. She scanned the platform, her dark eyes filled with both expectation and trembling hope. Every sound of boots on planks, every murmur of strangers around her, seemed to promise that the man she had crossed an ocean to meet would emerge from the crowd. But no one came. In her purse, folded neatly, were letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. They were the letters of Jonathan Hale, a man who had written with warmth, tenderness, and promises of devotion. His words had painted pictures of a home among the wheat fields, of quiet evenings by firelight, and of a life where loneliness would never again shadow her days. Elena had clutched those letters on sleepless nights, reading them aloud in the dim candlelight of her small room overseas, believing that a new life awaited her here. A tall man approached at last, but his expression was not the smile of a groom greeting his bride. His face was stern, his stride deliberate, and when he removed his hat, his voice carried a weight that froze the morning air. "You must be Miss Marquez." "Yes," she answered, her accent soft but clear. "And you are Jonathan?" The man's jaw tightened. He hesitated before speaking. "No, I am Michael Hale, Jonathan's brother. My brother, he passed last winter." The words fell like stones into her chest. Elena staggered slightly, her suitcase slipping from her hand. Passers-by glanced at her with fleeting pity before returning to their own business. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "No, there must be a mistake. He wrote to me. He promised." Michael bent to pick up her suitcase, his weathered hands betraying an unexpected gentleness. "I'm sorry." His illness took him quickly. "The letters you hold were true enough, but the man who wrote them is gone." Elena pressed the ribbon-tied bundle to her chest, as though clutching the very heartbeat of a ghost. Grief and disbelief tangled inside her, choking her words. She had journeyed across continents, across oceans, to be claimed as a bride. Instead, she had arrived at the grave of a man she had never met. Seeing her pale, Michael added quietly, "I cannot let you wander with nowhere to go. You will stay at the Hale house, at least until you find your path forward." She lifted her gaze to his. He looked nothing like the man she had imagined from the letters. His features were sharper, his eyes more guarded, as though life had stripped away softness and left only resilience. Yet beneath his sternness lay a flicker of something she could not yet name. Pity, perhaps, or a shadow of his brother's remembered affection. They walked together through the town, the air filled with curious whispers. Women at the general store peered from doorways. Men on porches exchanged knowing glances. The story spread quickly. The mail-order fiancée had arrived, only to discover her intended buried months before. The Hale house stood at the edge of the fields, its shutters rattling in the breeze, its roof weathered with years of storms. Michael opened the door for her, and Elena entered cautiously, her senses filled with the scent of pine wood and the faint lingering trace of tobacco. Every corner seemed haunted by absence. On the mantel above the hearth, a portrait of Jonathan smiled down with warm, steady eyes, the same eyes that had gazed at her from his letters. Elena's knees weakened. She sank into the nearest chair, clutching the portrait with trembling hands. Tears blurred her vision, and her voice cracked. "I came here to be his bride. Now what am I?" Michael, standing near the door, removed his hat again, as though in respect. "You are a woman who deserves more than silence for an answer. Jonathan may be gone, but I will not abandon his word. You'll have shelter here until you decide where your life leads next." His tone was measured, formal, yet beneath it lingered a heaviness he could not conceal. For Michael bore his own scars. Widowed 3 years past, he had sworn never again to invite tenderness into his home. Now, the arrival of his brother's fiancée threatened to unravel his resolve, for each glance at her reminded him of what he had lost and what might dangerously tempt him once more. That evening, as rain tapped against the windows, Elena unpacked the letters on the small desk in the guest room. She lit a candle and read the first one again. her lips moving soundlessly across Jonathan's words. When you come to me, Elena, I will keep you safe. No loneliness will touch you again. Her tears fell on the page, smudging the ink. In the silence of the house, she could almost hear his voice, but when she raised her head, it was Michael's shadow she saw across the doorway, watching her with an expression torn between duty and something far more dangerous. Neither spoke. The rain deepened, the candle flickered, and the space between them filled with an unspoken truth. This house, built for one promise, now held the seed of another, one bound to test them both. The unspoken tension. The days that followed Elena's arrival settled into a quiet rhythm, though nothing about it felt natural. She moved through the Hale household as though she were a guest in a stranger's home, yet every chair, every photograph, and every book reminded her of Jonathan. His absence was a presence unto itself, lingering in every shadow. Michael kept his distance at first. He rose early, tending to the fields, returning only when the sky burned orange with evening. His words were measured, his tone polite, yet he rarely looked her in the eyes for long. He told himself it was respect, but the truth was simpler. Her presence unsettled him. One evening, Elena cooked a simple supper. She worked clumsily and used the kitchen's tools, but her determination carried her through. When Michael entered, tired from the day, he paused at the sight of the table laid with bread, stew, and a carefully folded napkin at each place. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice low. "I wanted to," she replied softly. The letter spoke of sharing meals, of warmth. Her gaze faltered, and she added, "I thought it might feel less empty." Michael sat opposite her. For a moment, the silence between them grew unbearable. The clinking of spoons against bowls filled the space where words should have lived. Yet beneath the quiet, something else stirred, not hostility, but a fragile thread of connection. Later that night, Elena found herself wandering the parlor, her hand brushing against the spines of Jonathan's books. She paused at the mantel, staring at the portrait again. His eyes seemed to watch her, kind and eternal, as though asking why she lingered here in his absence. Behind her, footsteps approached. Michael's reflection appeared faintly in the glass of the frame. "You remind me of him," he said, his voice rough. "Not in looks, but in the way you carry hope." Jonathan always believed in more than what the world gave him. Elena turned, searching his face. "And you? Do you believe in anything?" He hesitated. "I used to. My wife taught me how. But she's gone, and so is Jonathan. Belief feels like a cruel joke now." The honesty in his tone pierced her. She wanted to comfort him, yet the act felt treacherous, as though her very sympathy betrayed the memory of the man who had written to her. That night, a storm broke across the fields. Wind howled against the shutters, and rain drummed ceaselessly on the roof. Elena hurried to close a window, but the force of the storm fought her. Michael appeared at her side, his hands steadying the frame. Their shoulders brushed, their breaths mingled, and for a heartbeat, the storm outside was drowned by the storm within. Their eyes met. The distance they had both guarded collapsed in an instant. Elena's hand lingered against his wrist, trembling, before she pulled back sharply. Michael stepped away, his chest heaving with words unsaid. "I'm sorry," he muttered, almost to himself. "This is wrong." Elena clutched the window frame, her heart hammering. "I know," she whispered, "but it doesn't feel wrong." The silence that followed was heavier than the thunder rolling above them. Neither dared move closer, but the truth had already surfaced. Desire was no longer a stranger in that house. The next day, whispers reached Elena. At the market, Clara Whitmore, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper tongue, approached her. Clara's words were sweet on the surface, yet laced with poison. "So you're the fiancée," she said, her smile thin. "Such a tragedy about Jonathan. But perhaps not such a tragedy for everyone. Michael's house is lonely, and lonely men, well, they don't always stay lonely." Elena flushed, unable to reply. Clara's gaze lingered too long, as if to claim knowledge of secrets not yet spoken. When Elena returned home, her heart was still unsettled, her mind replaying Clara's insinuations. That evening, she avoided Michael's eyes at supper. He noticed, though he said nothing. The distance between them had returned, but it no longer felt safe. It felt suffocating, as though both of them were holding their breath against the inevitable. When Elena retired to her room, she lit a candle and opened one of Jonathan's letters. The ink was faded, the words tender. When the storms of life come, you will not face them alone. She read it aloud, her voice breaking. Unbeknownst to her, Michael paused outside the door, listening. Each word deepened his guilt, yet also stoked the fire he could no longer ignore. The letters belonged to Jonathan, but the living heart that spoke them belonged to Elena. He stepped back into the hallway's darkness, his fists clenched. She inside, he outside, both caught in the same current, pulled toward a truth they feared to name. As the candle burned lower, Elena closed the letter and whispered into the silence. Jonathan, forgive me. I don't know if I came for you anymore, or for something else. And somewhere in the house, Michael echoed the same unspoken prayer. The weight of secrets. The days lengthened into summer, but the warmth of the season did little to ease the chill between Elena and Michael. What had begun as sympathy and cautious companionship now carried an unspoken charge. Every glance held meaning. Every silence pressed heavier than words. Elena spent her mornings tending the small garden beside the house, her hands buried in soil, her mind tangled with longing. Michael worked in the fields, his figure visible from the porch. She often caught herself watching him, her heart tightening with a blend of comfort and guilt. He was not Jonathan, yet his nearness filled the void Jonathan's absence had left, and that truth terrified her. The town had not remained blind to her presence. Gossip moved faster than wind through wheat. Whispers followed Elena at the market. Glances lingered too long at church. To many, she was still Jonathan's promised bride, and her place in Michael's household carried implications no one dared voice outright. Not yet. Clara Whitmore, however, had no such restraint. One afternoon, Elena found her waiting by the well, parasol tilted against the sun, lips curled in a smile that never reached her eyes. You've settled in quickly, Clara said, her tone deceptively light. Some might say, too quickly. The town watches, Miss Marquez. They wonder if grief is not such a heavy burden in the Hale house after all. Elena's pulse raced. She tightened her grip on the bucket, meeting Clara's gaze with quiet defiance. I came here as Jonathan's fiancée. I honor his memory. Clara tilted her head. Do you? Or do you honor his brother more? The word struck like a slap, though Clara's voice remained honeyed. Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked away, leaving Elena trembling beside the well. That evening, the tension burst within her. At supper, she placed Jonathan's letters on the table between them. The bundle, once her greatest treasure, now felt like a chain. Why did you bring me here, Michael? She asked, her voice breaking. Was it duty, pity, or something else you can't admit? Michael froze, his spoon clattering against the bowl. For a long moment he said nothing, his eyes shadowed. Finally, he spoke with a rough honesty. I brought you here because you had nowhere else. But pity has nothing to do with what I feel now. That is the problem. Elena's breath caught. His confession hung in the air, dangerous and liberating all at once. She wanted to reach for him, to close the distance, but the memory of Jonathan's promises held her back. Her voice trembled as she whispered, We are betraying him. Michael leaned forward, his eyes burning with conflict. He is gone, Elena, and we are not. The candlelight flickered between them, casting shadows that seemed to press them closer. Yet before either could move, a sharp knock rattled the door. Michael rose, jaw tight, and opened it to reveal Clara, her smile poised like a dagger. I thought I might return the book you lent me, she said sweetly, placing a worn volume into his hand. Her eyes, however, slid past him to where Elena sat. The unspoken accusation in her gaze was unmistakable. Michael dismissed her quickly, but the damage was done. Elena's chest tightened as realization dawned. Clara suspected everything. That night, Unable to sleep, Elena paced her room. The house was silent, yet her thoughts screamed. Jonathan's letters lay on the desk, their ink faded by her tears. She read them once more, desperate to feel the comfort they had once given. When you arrive, our home will be filled with laughter. You will never doubt your place beside me. But instead of solace, the words tore at her heart. She could no longer deny it. Her place was uncertain, her laughter hollow, her heart already slipping into forbidden hands. A floorboard creaked outside. Michael stood in the doorway, his face half lit by the moon. "I heard you pacing," he said softly. She turned toward him, her eyes glistening. "I can't carry this secret. I can't live between two men, one dead, one alive. It will destroy me." He stepped closer, though still a breath apart. "Then let me share the weight. If we are damned for this, let us be damned together." Her tears fell freely now. For an instant, she leaned toward him, surrendering to the pull that had haunted them both. Their lips brushed, brief, desperate, and shattering. Then she drew back, gasping as if burned. "No, not yet." Michael closed his eyes, struggling against the storm in his chest. One day, he murmured, half promise, half curse. He turned and left her in the moonlit room, the silence thick with betrayal, not yet complete, but inevitable. Elena pressed her hands to her lips, her heart pounding. She knew Clara's whispers would soon become shouts, that the town's judgment would come swiftly. Yet none of that terrified her as much as her own truth. She no longer loved the ghost who had written her letters. She loved the man whose footsteps echoed down the hall. The consequence of desire. The morning sun spilled across the wheat fields, golden and cruelly bright, as though the world itself chose to shine on a day that promised ruin. Elena stood at the window, her hands gripping the sill, watching Michael harness the horse for market. His movements were brisk, but his posture betrayed the weight pressing on him. They both knew the fragile secrecy of their desire could not hold much longer. The truth arrived sooner than either expected. By the time they reached town, whispers had hardened into certainty. Clara Whitmore had seen to that. She stood outside the general store with a cluster of neighbors, her voice pitched just loud enough for all to hear. "The poor girl," Clara declared, feigning sympathy, promised to Jonathan, yet keeping company under Michael's roof. What would the dead think of the living? Elena froze, her cheeks burning. Every gaze turned toward her, some laced with pity, others with contempt. Michael's jaw tightened, his hand twitching as though he might silence Clara with a single blow. But instead, he placed himself between Elena and the crowd, his voice low but firm. "That's enough," he said. "She is under my protection. You will speak no further." The words should have reassured her, yet Elena felt no relief. Under my protection was not the same as at my side, and the town knew it. That evening, silence cloaked the house. Elena sat by the fire, Jonathan's letters in her lap, their ribbon frayed from constant handling. Michael entered, his face shadowed by the lamplight. He stopped before her, as though weighing every word he meant to speak. "Marry me," he said abruptly. The letters slipped from her hands, scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. She stared at him, stunned. "You would marry me? After everything?" "Not for appearances," he answered, his voice rough. "Not to silence Clara, not to placate the town. For you, because what I feel, I can't hide it any longer." Her heart surged at his confession, but fear held her back. She rose, shaking her head. "If I marry you, Michael, they will say I betrayed Jonathan, that I was faithless from the moment I stepped off the train. And maybe they'd be right." He reached for her hands, holding them tightly. "Jonathan is gone. What remains is the living, and I will not let your life be buried with him." Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. "And what if I'm only a reminder to you? What if you see him every time you see me?" His grip softened. "I see you, Elena. Not Jonathan's bride. Not my brother's shadow. You." For the first time, she felt the weight lift, though only slightly. She nodded, unable to speak, her throat thick with emotion. Yet their resolve came at a cost. Clara, humiliated and spurned, left town soon after, but not before unleashing her venom one final time. At church, she declared in a voice that carried through the pews, "Some sins may hide in shadows, but not forever. The dead are not so easily replaced." Elena endured the stares, the judgment, the half-turnbacks. Michael endured them too, walking beside her with unshaken steadiness. But though the scandal did not break them, it carved scars neither could deny. One evening, as the season turned, Elena carried Jonathan's letters into the yard. Michael joined her, watching silently as she knelt beside a small fire. One by one, she fed the letters into the flames. The paper curled and blackened, the words dissolving into smoke. When the last ribbon turned to ash, she whispered, "I came here for him, but I stayed for you." Michael touched her shoulder gently. "Then let the past rest. We'll build something of our own." The fire burned low, its glow fading into the twilight. Elena felt the ache of loss still, but it no longer chained her. Instead, she felt the fragile, dangerous hope of beginning again. Not as Jonathan's promised bride, but as a woman who had chosen love in defiance of memory, scandal, and fear. As they turned back toward the house, the fields swayed in the evening breeze, whispering like voices of the past. And though she knew the town might never forgive, Elena no longer sought their blessing. For the first time since her arrival, she felt a sense of belonging. Not in Jonathan's letters, not in the memory of what could have been, but in the hand of the man who walked beside her. The path ahead was uncertain, littered with judgment and whispers, but it was theirs. And in that, she found enough strength to take the first step forward.